I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got a phone call from U.S. President Joe Biden to touch base on several topics 6 months into Mr. Biden's residency in the White House. A readout from the Prime Minister's office says Mr. Trudeau made the case for Canada to be a priority economic partner. Mr. Trudeau also raised the issue of the Canadian-owned cross-border Line 5 pipeline that Michigan wants to shut down for fear of an environmental disaster in the Great Lakes. The state and Calgary-based Enbridge are to meet with the court-appointed mediator on August 11th. Several former Afghan interpreters now living in Canada are expressing concerns for their extended families back in Afghanistan and are pressuring the government to help them. They argue their previous work with Canada has left their parents and siblings back home at risk of Taliban reprisals. Ottawa has acknowledged the threat the Taliban poses to the families of interpreters already resettled in Canada. Meanwhile, Immigration Minister Marco Mendicino invited anyone who believed their relatives could be eligible for help to contact his office. With many predicting a federal election call is just weeks away, a new survey suggests Canada's federal parties are holding relatively steady in terms of voter support. The latest online survey by Leger and the Association for Canadian Studies, done on the weekend, found 29% of nearly 2,100 Canadians asked would vote for the Liberals if an election were held today. That compares to 24% who said they would vote for Conservatives and 16% for New Democrats. The federal government is expecting to receive more than 2.3 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine this week. Last week, the federal government had 6.7 million COVID-19 vaccines in its national reserve, which provinces and territories can draw from if they are in need. The new COVID-19 vaccine shipments come as Canada's top doctor warns that the country could be headed towards a fourth wave of COVID-19 cases if public health restrictions are lifted before vaccination rates pick up. A new study out of Toronto's Sinai Health Hospital has found there was no unusual change in the rate of preterm or stillbirths during the COVID-19 pandemic compared to previous years. Some parts of the world, including the United States and Ireland, reported a decrease in preterm births, while other countries, such as the United Kingdom and Italy, reported increases in stillbirths. The research published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal found the mean preterm birth rate ranged from 7.32% to 8.59% during the pre-pandemic period. This is compared to 7.87% during 2020. The mean stillbirth rate was 0.56%, while the 2020 rate was 0.53%. A federally funded project designed to forecast homelessness in Canada says there could be an extra 1,200 plus people living on city streets next year, even if the pandemic only has a small impact on social and economic need. The 2% growth is expected to be fastest in Ontario, which would grow at 5 times the national rate, followed by British Columbia at 3 times the rate. The group Help Seeker, which received the funding, says the numbers should help policymakers decide on where to put resources. The descendants of a pioneering Canadian industrialist say they have a right to use the family name in their business as they face a lawsuit from an international bank. Brendan Holt-Dunn says he named the venture capital fund Holt Exchange after his great-great-grandfather, Sir Herbert Holt, who became the richest man in Canada in the early 20th century. But Credit Suisse says it acquired the brand Holt through the purchase of an unrelated consulting company originally based in the United States. Mr. Dunn says he doesn't think there's any overlap. Career coaches and recruiters say the video job interview is here to stay as the economy reopens after over a year of COVID-19 restrictions. Mike Shachtman, the regional vice president of human resource consulting company Robert Half, says eye contact seems to be replacing the handshake in these virtual meetings. He says many people focus on their own image on the screen and fail to make eye contact with their interviewer. The use of dating apps in the last 18 months of the pandemic has surged. Tinder reported 2020 as its busiest year, while Hinge saw its revenue triple in this time. Many people say they plan to continue their pandemic dating behaviors, including having more video dates and looking for deeper connections. One person is chosen each year to be inducted into the North American Fiddlers Hall of Fame. And this year, for the first time, the inductee is a resident of Saskatchewan. J.J. Guy of Saskatoon was selected for the honor, which recognizes those who promote, perpetuate, and preserve fiddling. Mr. Guy currently tours with Gordon Stope, who is also a Hall of Fame inductee, and the pair have made 5 albums together. All right, stay with us. Up next, we speak with a new organization that looks to connect farmers with Indigenous groups for land-based reconciliation initiatives. We'll have an interview with Nettie Wiebe, a member of the Treaty Land Sharing Network and Saskatchewan farmer, up next. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on the Forum Daily. A new land-sharing organization looks to connect landholders in Saskatchewan with Indigenous land users so they can practice their way of life. The Treaty Land Sharing Network says this is a crucial move toward land-based reconciliation. In many cases, Indigenous land users in these regions already have permission to use the land under treaty rights, but this network allows for safe and organized use of the land. Well, joining us now to tell us more on the Treaty Land Sharing Network is Ms. Nettie Wiebe, a member of the Treaty Land Sharing Network and a farmer in Saskatchewan. Ms. Wiebe, welcome to Forum Daily.
Hello.
So let's start with how and why the Treaty Land Sharing Network came to be.
Well, it came to be because of conversations between some Indigenous artist, educator, hunter, Philip Brass, and a settler person who, like many of us who are on the land, are uneasy about what has happened in the past in this land. I mean, we're settled in this land as we are as farmers, but we know that there's a deep history and that these territories were the territories of Indigenous peoples long before our ancestors got here. So that's the impetus. But it's also in this context of Saskatchewan particularly, a moment these last years when we have realized just how fractured and sometimes how brutal the land tensions are here between settlers and Indigenous peoples. And I have to just say off the top that the Colton Boushie case, the murder of Colton Boushie, was so egregious and so sad and so tragic, and a reminder of just how land, relationship to land, access to land, the whole question of treaty rights needs to be reoriented, particularly in this place.
So can you tell us a little bit more about how this organization works in terms of the land sharing process?
Well, let me just say off the top that we're not in this network because we're particularly altruistic people. We are in this network because these are treaty agreements, and we're all treaty people. We wouldn't be on this land if there hadn't been treaties. And so we're the other part, the Government of Canada and Saskatchewan, of course, and we who are on the land are all party to these treaties with Indigenous peoples, and Indigenous peoples had never ceded or surrendered the land. They had agreed to share the land. So we're in some ways just trying to honor and respect our part of the treaty. And that's sadly not been the history of the Canadian interchange with Indigenous people. Treaties have been broken everywhere and continuously and continue to be broken. So we just want to do our part to honor those treaties and to begin to reshape the relationship here in the prairie region between peoples of the land. We as farmers are peoples of the land, but so are Indigenous peoples. They have a long and deep relationship to the land.
Now, considering that this organization started working in around 2020, can you detail the progress it has made so far in connecting Indigenous people with farmers?
Well, actually, I was at the July 15th launch where they did a pipe ceremony, and we had conversations, good and deep conversations with Indigenous peoples that were there, and in concert with the treaty, the commissioner of the treaty office of the Treaty Commissioner. And that helped to sort of normalize and reassure people that this is a sharing of the land. It's not an opening of the land to whatever. It's a respectful sharing of the land where Indigenous peoples have the right to hunt, to gather medicinal plants, to do ceremonies, and that's an agreement. We want to do that in a way that everybody is safe, and that our use of the land and their use of the land begin to meet in a way that is generous and beneficial for all, and specifically beneficial for the land, because we have a lot as settlers, we have farmers, we have a lot to learn from Indigenous peoples about the land, about the plants, about animals, about care of the land.
All right, Ms. Wiebe, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily and sharing this with us.
My pleasure. This is a moment of hope for us.
All right, stay tuned. More national headlines coming up after the breaks. Cooler weather temperatures are in the forecast for later this week in BC, but a shifting weather pattern could also bring winds and possible thunderstorms to the province's wildfire zones. Fire Information Officer Erica Berg says the numbers of fires in BC have stayed in the 240 to 245 range over the past week, which is much different than previous weeks where there was a steady buildup of fires. She says fire crews have been holding their own over the past week, but the weather patterns could bring new challenges. Ms. Berg says wildfires have burned more than 5,500 square kilometers since April. British Columbia Christmas tree growers are warning that some trees may be a little browner this holiday season due to this summer's extreme temperatures. The growers say the late June heat dome that drove temperatures above 40 Celsius had scorched trees destined for family living rooms this Christmas. Paul Huskin, who is the president of the Southwest Christmas Tree Association, says he's hearing from BC growers and others in Washington and Oregon who also experienced tree damage during the heat dome. RCMP in Alberta say a 26-year-old tree planter has died after being attacked by a bear. Spokesman Corporal Troy Savinkoff says police were called on Saturday afternoon about the attack, which happened in a remote location northwest of Swan Hills. Alberta's Justice and Solicitor General Office suspects the woman was working in the area when an adult black bear attacked. Community safety officers are providing an alternative to traditional law enforcement in Regina. Since May, 3 constables have been walking, driving, and biking through the 900-hectare park in Wascana Centre to enforce traffic laws and bylaw rules and to help connect people with supports when they need them. One officer says only one person out of a dozen he has spoken to who were sleeping in the park knew about the services available to him. Advancing wildfires on Manitoba and Ontario's provincial boundary have prompted Manitoba's government to order residents of cottages to evacuate. Residents of Davidson Lake Cottage subdivision, located in Nopaming Provincial Park, were ordered to leave yesterday afternoon due to the Kenora 051 blaze in Ontario. Manitoba's government says wildfires across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Northwest Ontario will continue to bring smoke into all parts of the province until conditions improve. Thousands of doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine in Ontario are set to expire soon, and pharmacists are warning that the supply could go to waste. The CEO of the Ontario Pharmacists Association says Moderna shots are set to expire in early August, and supply that arrives in bulk must be used up within 30 days. Toronto Mayor John Tory is paying tribute to Kyle Lowry after the basketball star's announcement that he's headed to the Miami Heat. Mr. Tory called Mr. Lowry the greatest Raptor of all time, describing him as a fighter and a leader. Mr. Lowry broke the news in a tweet less than 45 minutes after free agency officially kicked off yesterday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Deals will not be considered official until noon on Friday. The family of a black man shot and killed by police in a Montreal suburb wants to know why officers opened fire.
We want answers. We are very unhappy, and I'm speaking with a lot of emotions this morning because instead of getting help, he got 3 bullets.
Jean-René Jr. Olivier's family say they had called police because they were concerned for his well-being and wanted him to get help. During a news conference, Dolmy Laguerre, Olivier's cousin, showed the small kitchen knife that Olivier allegedly had in his possession and questioned why 6 officers and 3 bullets were necessary to bring Olivier under control. Quebec pork producers are asking the province to end a strike at a major slaughterhouse because thousands of pigs risk being euthanized. Olimel said on July 30th that it had accepted a settlement proposal from the Conciliation team, but the labor union said it had received no salary offer from the company over the past few days. Employees at the plant have been on strike since April 28th. Nova Scotia's Liberal NDP and Progressive Conservatives are promising to strengthen the powers of the province's Information Commissioner by giving her order-making power. But the Liberals are, at this point, sticking to earlier statements that they'll conduct a review of the legislation. The NDP and PCs say that if they are elected, they will make the Information Commissioner an independent officer of the legislature with order-making powers. The Charlottetown Airport has welcomed FLAIR Airlines with its new non-stop service to Toronto's Pearson Airport. It's the second new airline for the island's airport in less than a week after PAL Airlines introduced a new service between Halifax and Charlottetown. All right, we take a look at what's making news around the world after the break as the White House presses for action on renter protection after an eviction moratorium expired. Meanwhile, North Korea releases emergency rice reserves and Doctors Without Borders closes a clinic in Haiti. We'll have these stories and more international news coming up next on the Forum Daily, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after these short messages. The White House is pressing state and local governments to swiftly adopt policies to protect renters after an eviction moratorium expired over the weekend. In a statement on Monday, the White House emphasized that the federal government has provided $46.5 billion to keep renters where they are. It also accused states and cities of being too slow to act in getting that aid to those in need. But President Joe Biden is drawing criticism that he was slow to address the end of the moratorium. South Korea's spy agency says North Korea is releasing emergency rice reserves as a heat wave and drought worsen a food shortage. North Korea's economy has been hit by the pandemic, and its food situation is expected to deteriorate more until the autumn harvest. South Korean lawmakers say the spy agency told them North Korea is sending rice reserved for wartime uses to people with little food, laborers, and rural state agencies. Doctors Without Borders has closed an emergency clinic in Haiti's capital amid gang violence that has left more than 19,000 people homeless. The clinic in the Martissant neighborhood of Port-au-Prince had been operating for 15 years and served a community of some 300,000 people. Last year, it admitted more than 33,000 people into its emergency room. Doctors Without Borders says it will seek to relocate its clinic elsewhere in Port-au-Prince. A Sudanese official says local authorities in Kassala province have found around 50 bodies in the river between the countries over the past week. They say these bodies are apparently of people fleeing the war in neighboring Ethiopia's Tigray region. 2 Ethiopian health workers in the Sudan border community of Hamdayet confirm seeing the bodies found in the Sedet River, known in Ethiopia as the Tikez. The river flows through some of the most troubled areas of the 9-month conflict in the Tigray region. An international human rights group says Lebanese officials knew of the risks posed by the highly explosive material stored at Beirut's port and did nothing to protect the public against it. Human Rights Watch said in a report released on Tuesday that those officials are currently doing all they can to thwart the investigation into the August 4th explosion. At least 214 people were killed in the blast and over 6,000 injured. A Belarusian activist who ran a group in Ukraine helping Belarusians fleeing persecution has been found dead in the Ukrainian capital. Police say Vitaly Shishov, the leader of the Kiev-based Belarusian house in Ukraine, was found hanged in one of the city's parks near his home. A probe has been launched with police investigating a possible murder made to look like a suicide. Twitter has signed deals with the Associated Press and Reuters to help elevate accurate information on its platform. Twitter says the program will expand its existing work to help explain why certain subjects are trending on the site, to show information and news from trusted resources, provide context on topics garnering widespread interest, and to debunk misinformation. The majority of low-income families in the European Union can't afford a summer holiday, according to a study by the European Trade Union Confederation. That's more than 35 million people, the union said Monday after analyzing data from Eurostat, which is the bloc's statistical office. According to the study, 28% of EU citizens don't have the means to enjoy even a one-week holiday away from home. The governing body of the International Monetary Fund has approved a historic $650 billion expansion in the agency's resources. The aim is to support economically vulnerable countries as they battle the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting economic downturn. The 190-nation lending institution said Monday that its board of governors approved the expansion of its reserves, known as special drawing rights. The United Nations General Assembly has approved a resolution establishing a permanent forum of people of African descent to provide expert advice on addressing the challenges of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and intolerance. The resolution, adopted by a consensus by the 193-member world body, also calls for the forum to serve as a platform for improving the safety and quality of life and livelihoods of people of African descent and their full inclusion in the societies where they live. Millions of refugees living in crowded camps are still waiting to receive COVID-19 vaccines. For months now, the World Health Organization has been urging countries to prioritize immunizing refugees. It notes 85% of the world's 26 million refugees live in poor countries, struggling to vaccinate their own populations, and refugees have been pushed to the back of the line. A giant panda on loan from China has given birth to female twin cubs at a French zoo. The Beauval Zoo, south of Paris, says the cubs are very lively, pink, and plump, and their mother, Huan Huan, is taking good care of them. Huan Huan and father, Yuan Ji, are at Beauval on a 10-year loan from China. All right, that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. We'll see you next time. Take care, Canada.